Chapter 4. Matt and his parents arrived at the cabins where the wedding was being held early. They wanted to have plenty of time to dress and make sure things were just right so JV wouldn't have to worry about it, and Rebecca wouldn't try to do it all herself. It was a pretty place, a tiny town about half an hour from the hotel where his folks were staying. He wasn't impressed as they first pulled into town. Sure, it was a town in the mountains surrounded by trees, but when he got to the actual venue he saw why his sister had chosen it. There were several cabins clustered near a large green space with a small river to one side. There were footbridges over the river with paths leading to several fishing ponds not far away. It was really a pretty area, and though it looked nothing like it, something about the space reminded of him of the green sanctuary he'd built in his postage stamp-sized backyard. Matt changed into his suit and made his first stop to check on the groom. "It's open," Steve said when he knocked. Letting himself in, he glanced around. The cabin might look rustic on the outside, but the inside was comfortably decorated. It had a small sofa not far from the fireplace and a recliner facing that. He could see curling up with someone near the flames on a cold evening, much as he'd seen Steve and his sister do in their home. "You have everything you need?" Matt asked. "I think so." Steve was looking in the mirror trying to make his tie lay straight. Matt smiled and helped. "You don't wear these much, do you?" "No." Steve scowled. "I think the last time I wore one was Nick's wedding." "Do you have the license?" "I have it." Nick held over his jacket front showing the piece of paper was folded in the inside pocket. "And the ring?" "Right here." Steve stuck his hand in his pocket and pulled out a small gold ring. Instead of putting it back in his pocket, he slipped it onto the pinky finger on his right hand. It only went about halfway down before stopping. "I won't lose it there." "Okay, anything else you need?" "I think I'm good." "All right, I'm gonna go check on my sister then." Steve smiled. "Tell her I'll see her soon." Matt left the small cabin, walked across the small clearing, and knocked on the door of the second cabin. "Come in," JV's voice rang out. He opened the door a crack. "Are you decent? Come on in." Stepping into the room, his breath caught in his throat at the sight of her. She looked nothing like the girl who lived in his mind. Sure, she was the same person, but instead of the ponytail she wore day in and day out, her hair was down, or at least mostly. It hung in soft curls around her neck and shoulders. Someone had applied makeup so carefully that it looked like she wasn't wearing any at all. The only reason he knew she was wearing any now was because he knew she normally didn't. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to tell. She wore a single strand of pearls around her neck and small clusters of them in each ear. The necklace he recognized. "I see Mom's been here." "She gave them to me." One hand lifted to touch the strand at her throat as tears pooled in her eyes. "You didn't know?" he smiled. "No. They were always meant to be yours." She frowned. "Well, yeah, I knew that. I just thought it would be later." "Don't you know how Mom got them?" "From Grandma." "Yeah, but when?" "I don't know." "Why would that matter?" He shook his head. "Grandma gave them to her the day she married Dad." "I had no idea." Her fingers ran back and forth over the ivory-colored gems. The door opened and their mother came in. "Mom, where did Grandma get these?" "Daddy gave them to her the day I was born, and told her they were for me, eventually. She wore them while I was growing up, then passed them to me when I got married. He gave her something when each of us was born." She paused and smiled. "The pieces she got when my brothers were born, she passed down to their mates." "That's so sweet." JV glanced out the window near her. Matt knew his parents had done something similar because his mother had given Connie a necklace on their wedding day as well. He pushed thoughts of Connie out of his mind. He was determined to focus on today. Do you need anything? Can I do anything for you? I just checked on everything out there, his mom said. It's all fine. Is everyone ready? JV looked around until she found a clock. We've got a little time. Do me a favor and go check on Rebecca. Make sure she's not overdoing it. And how am I to stop her? He lifted one brow. Tell her if she doesn't sit down and take it easy, you'll go find Nick. That always works. If it doesn't, actually go find him. All right. He turned to go but stopped and turned back. I nearly forgot. I was supposed to deliver a message to you. What? See you soon. Matt paused. I assume you know who it's from. She grinned, her happiness spreading across her face. Yes, he will. Outside, he wandered around until he found Rebecca. She was sitting in a padded chair, her feet resting in another, issuing orders. Looks like you're staying out of trouble. He sat in the chair next to her. Who sent you looking for me? She looked at him from the corner of her eye. JV, he laughed. He should have known she would realize he had orders. You can tell her I'm being good. She frowned for just a moment, then grumbled. Though not by choice. Oh. Did someone catch up to you and make you sit before I came along? Her pouting and grouching was funny for some reason. No. My feet hurt. I had to get off them for a little while. You want me to rub them for you, or will Nick kill me for touching you? I'm willing to risk it if you are. She lowered her feet from the chair, spun in her seat before lifting them up into his lap. I shouldn't have worn these shoes. They're killing me. They're not the only reason, I'm sure. He worked the stiff muscles in her small feet with his thumbs, loosening the knots in the muscles. He'd finished one foot and picked up the other, when he caught a familiar scent. He looked around and found Nick approaching, a scowl cutting deep between his eyes. What is going on here? The con stopped beside their seats. Did you try to do too much? He looked down at his mate. No. I've been sitting here for the last hour. These shoes make my feet hurt. I was sent to make sure she was behaving and found her here. She said her feet hurt, so I offered to help. He kept working the foot in his hands, waiting to see if Nick was angry that Matt was touching his mate. Nick looked at Matt. As long that's all you're touching, I'll let you live. His voice was light, but the look in his eyes was dead serious. I've nothing but good intentions here, sir. Matt's eyes dropped to Rebecca. Connie used to complain about her feet after wearing heels all day. I couldn't convince her to ditch them. Who's Connie? Rebecca tilted her head to one side. She was my wife. He gave her a sad smile. She was about as far along as you are when they were taken from me. He let his gaze drop to where his hands kept kneading the bottom of her foot. I'm so sorry. Rebecca reached to put one hand over his, but her belly wouldn't let her bend that far. I'm sorry for your loss, Nick put in. I didn't realize you had a mate. Not a mate, just married, but she was my world, and when she died it nearly killed me. That's so heartbreaking. Something in her voice made him look back at Rebecca. Tears slid silently down her face. I didn't mean to make you cry. He lifted on side of his mouth. It's been a while. I won't say the pain fades, but it changes. Becomes something different than the sharp loss it once was. It's not just that. Rebecca waved one hand, fanning her face, while the other caressed her swollen belly. It's these darn hormones. I cry at the drop of a hat these days. How long since you lost them? Nick sat down and wrapped one arm around Rebecca. He pulled a tissue from his pocket and handed it to her. She dabbed at the tears still leaking. 2.5 years. Sometimes it feels like a million years ago, but there are moments where it feels like yesterday. His hand stilled and he sat for several minutes. Rebecca pulled her feet away and stood. The two of them slipped away, leaving him to himself for a few minutes. Matt stared at his hands still resting in his lap for a while. He wasn't sure how much time had passed before he looked up, blinked several times and realized he should be doing something, anything. Pushing himself to his feet, he went to find out where he should be.